Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has joined LBC for a call-in show. Members of the public rang in with their questions for the person likely to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer. These calls are always carefully vetted, but there was one question that Reeves probably wasn't expecting.
Right, let's go to Helena, who's a first-time caller in Nottingham. Helena, hello, what would you like to ask?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Helena.
Hi, I've got a question. I've got a quote here from a pretty prominent economist, and they say that Labour needs to provide an alternative to aggressive policies being prioritised by the Conservatives. The banks and those earning more than £100,000 could quite easily contribute a little more, and unless they do, inequality and poverty will inevitably soar in the months and years ahead. Do you agree with that statement?
Now that seems like pretty sound economic advice. Tax the richest a little bit more and claw back some money from our bloated financial sector. Then use the extra cash to reduce poverty and inequality, perhaps by funding progressive policies, like the things Keir Starmer pledged when he was running for party leader. Let's see how Reeves answered.
The way that I believe that you can reduce inequality, reduce poverty, and actually also improve the living standards of ordinary working people, not in poverty, but struggling to get by, is through growing the economy. Because that is the way that we can ensure that working people have more money in their pockets and we have more money for public services. And one of the real failures over these last 13 years is to grow our economy in all parts of the country, creating those good quality, high-paid jobs. So my priority is to get that economic growth back in our economy, to lift people out of poverty and to have the money we need to invest in our schools and our hospitals and so much else of the public realm, which has been, decimated, frankly, by this Conservative government.
Now, that's not a firm yes. In fact, it's a classic Labour answer at the minute, talking about growing the economy without really saying how, and then letting trickle-down economics do the rest. But little did she know, Reeves was in for a plot twist.
Just going back to Helena's question, the economist that she quoted, that was actually you.
Well, look, I want to reduce poverty and inequality. I didn't go into politics, but how do you do that? What are the practical things that we can do?
Well, your suggestion in that quote was to tax the banks more and those earning more than £100,000 more, but you've gone back on that.
Well, look, the way that I think that we can lift people out of poverty and reduce inequality, as I say, is to get the economy growing. And that has been the missing ingredient these last 13 years.
So Rachel Reeves went into politics to reduce inequality and poverty. But people understandably want to know, practically, how she plans on doing that. She previously had a practical answer, higher taxation on those who can afford it. But now she seems to have one vague line, grow the economy. By the way, that caller, Helena, is also known as the streamer No Justice MTG. You might even have seen her in the Novara live chat. This is how she responded to Reeves's comments.
She's going to press the growth button, right? The Conservatives have had access to the big red growth button for 13 years, and they've just not pressed it. Don't know what they were doing. Rachel Reeves, she's going to take the necessary steps to go and press the growth button, because she's not going to plan for growth. The only real actual plan I've heard from her is her saying, well, we need to reform to be able to crowd in private sector investment. When in the own article that I cited here, she even said there that there should be no expectation for private sector investment to happen in the absence of public sector investment, which is, again, these are all statements that she's previously made that I agree with. I think we should be taxing the rich more. I think we shouldn't be relying on private sector investment. But when she says she wants to reform her way to growth, to get more private investment, this is right-wing. This is neoliberal, Thatcherite, supply-side, deregulatory economics. That's the only way that you can look at this. The other option, that's what a kind of more Keynesian economist would think, someone who's more kind of on the centre left, is that you would incentivize growth by using fiscal stimulus. You'd use fiscal stimulus to put more money into people's hands, more demand in the economy to be able to incentivize the supply side of the economy to meet stimulus on the demand end. That's what we want to see. It's what the National Investment Bank plan was as far as the Jeremy Corbyn manifesto was concerned. That's why growth and interest rates were so low for so long, is because there wasn't enough fiscal stimulus. There wasn't enough demand side policy to get the economy moving again and get people spending money, which is why we've had anemic growth for so long. And those problems have persisted up until now.
So the Tories have run out of ideas. That seems patently clear. There are buildings crumbling beneath our feet after 13 years of austerity and Tufton Street free market economics. And there seems to be a yearning from people like Helena, and I'm sure plenty of others, for a more radical, a bolder, progressive vision. But Labour seems to be sticking to its guns that it's going to be able to convince people that it can grow the economy. I think it may come unstuck during an election period where it's asked constantly, how exactly are you going to grow the economy? But let's see. And Reeves's answer left another caller infuriated too.
You said you came into politics to change things, and yet all I've heard from you and the front bench is Tory policies for a Tory crisis. You're not going to tax wealth. You're not going to do much with income tax. You're leaving the profits of the banks, the water and the energy untouched. I remember very well, because I was born in that period, the Attlee government. And what they came in with was a four-letter word, hope. You aren't communicating hope. There is no ambition in evidence in what you're doing. And they had a much harder job than you've got to rebuild the country after the Second World War. COVID is bad. 2008 was terrible. But austerity has to be stopped. And you seem to be wanting to carry on worshipping the Treasury, because you are an ex-banker, Bank of England banker, and you don't seem to be in making any kind of ambition clear to me as a voter, or the public as voters, whether you're prepared to rise to these challenges, which are far worse than what we had in World War II.
Why might Labour have rode back on their plans to tax the wealthy? Well, if we're going to talk about it properly, so obviously tax reform continually polls as popular. It seems like an absolute no-brainer. Why would you not, in times when the rich are just getting richer, when wealth inequality has remained completely stagnant in the same, the divide is the same as it was 17 years ago, why would you not tax the rich? Why would you not talk about reforming taxing as a whole, reform the council tax perhaps? All these policies are pretty damn popular when you put them to the general public. There was a really good New Statesman article that came out, I think today maybe, which talks about the great tax con and how Labour is really letting themselves down by not making tax and reforming tax a central part of their pitch for leading the country. There's a quote from Gary Stevenson, friend of Novara, on there in this article, where he says it's hard not to see the tax code as a class-based system, and that we're living in a new aristocracy. Everything, the entire economic tax system, including things like qualitative easing, are all set up in order to keep the wealthy really bloody wealthy. When you're talking about why Labour might have, why are they shunning something that would be such an obvious vote winner? Well, I think personally that the answer lies when you look at the party's finances and their membership. So Labour, I think it was quite recently actually that they released their sort of membership figures for last year, and they'd lost 125,000 members since the general election in 2019, which obviously will come with an accompanying drop in membership fees. Yet, in 2022, the Labour Party raised nearly £50 million with a £2 million surplus, which is some of the most money they've raised in years. So here's the key bit of that. So National World analysis revealed that last year, donations from private individuals and companies to the Labour Party outstripped contributions made by trade unions or members. Half of Labour's donations now come from individuals or private companies. 35% comes from trade unions. The largest single donor to the Labour Party was Lord Sainsbury, who I think at one point gave $2 million in one go to the Labour Party. Do they want to piss these people off? That's the question, because a wealth tax doesn't matter how benevolent these millionaires are. Some of them will get pissed off by a wealth tax. And, people who fund the Labour Party, maybe less so if, individual donors like Lord Sainsbury, so many they don't even care, but someone like who works as an executive in one of these big corporate companies that they're courting, they're going to be pissed off if Labour is saying, well, actually, we're going to do a wealth tax. They're like, whoa, don't come for my bonus. And Labour are really pivoting to become a party that are funded rather than workers who make up trade unions, rather than members on the ground, these grassroots base, a party funded by privately held wealth. We already have one of those. It's called the Tory party. But this is a deliberate strategy that they're following to distance themselves from the unions. There was a Politico article earlier in this year as well, which looked at Lord Mandelson's involvement with Labour, because he's back in the fold. Apparently, he got the ear of Keir Starmer. He was saying that this is deliberate. We don't want to be seen as influenced by these hard left militant unions. We want to almost, disaffiliate, not in name, but in terms of where the money's flowing. And instead, we want to ally ourselves with these big companies. So you've got nearly 8 million from these private donors, which this company called Ecocitrusy, which I can't pronounce properly, but it's a renewables firm, and Drax Power, who obviously do nuclear power. So Labour could still say, we're working with big corporates that are green, but it's still a big bloody corporate. It still has big bloody corporate interests. Those overwhelm any sort of collective interest on the part of the general public. At the heart of that, anytime you get a big corporate business, what people are mostly concerned with, whatever message they say, we're going to do green renewables, we're going to do this and that, what they're really concerned with is capital, the movement of capital, how much capital is going in their pockets, how much capital that firm is making in general. And the conclusion is obvious. Labour no longer wants to be seen as on the side of the workers. Instead, they want to be seen as on the side of big business.